I wondered that question because oftentimes when we think of a great cloud of witnesses, the first thing that comes to mind for me is a funeral, right? That's part of what we normally say in a funeral. So I often think of a picture of people dressed in dark clothing standing around a grave, an open grave. Or I think about all of those people laying in the ground beneath our feet who are watching over us as we celebrate someone's life, right? Those are the things that it comes to mind for me. I often also think of loved ones, folks that maybe I've only met once or twice in my life. But mostly it's made up the folks who have paved the way for me to stand here before you this morning. People like those the writer of Hebrews mentions when he speaks about the great courage and determination that many people had throughout our history, our Christian history, our Hebrew history. But there's also three women in particular that come to mind for me immediately. They're women who have such great stories, who have touched me deeply, because like the women in my life and my personal family who have touched my heart and taught me about faith, these women have taught me through the reading of their life stories what it means to persevere no matter what is placed in your way, what may block your path. And so I want to introduce you to these women. These women this morning. This is the first one. This is Mary. She was born on, and I'm going to read this, so bear with me. She was born on April 9th, 1921. She was a mathematician and an aerospace engineer at the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics. And if you're familiar with that, that's the predecessor of NASA. She worked at Langley Research Center in Hampton, Virginia for most of her career. She started as a human computer in the segregated West Area Computing Division in 1951. In 1958, after taking engineering classes in an all-white high school, male school, in the evenings, she became NASA's first black female engineer. And after 34 years of working at NASA, Mary had earned the most senior engineering position available. She realized that she could not earn further promotions without becoming a supervisor, and so she accepted a demotion to become a manager of both the Federal Women's Program in the NASA Office of Equal Opportunity Programs and of the Affirmative Action Program. In this role, she worked to influence the hiring and promotion of women in NASA's science, engineering, and mathematics careers. So that's Mary. This is Creola Catherine Johnson. She was born on August 26, 1918. Is anybody paying attention to these dates? Catherine was an American mathematician as well, whose calculations of orbital mechanics as a NASA employee were critical to the success of the first and subsequent U.S. crewed space flights. During her 33-year career at NASA and its predecessor, she earned a reputation for mastering complex mathematical manual calculations and helped pioneer the use of mechanical computers to perform those tasks. Her work included calculating trajectories, launch windows, and emergency return paths for Project Mercury spaceflights, including those for the astronauts Alan Shepard and John Glenn. She also calculated the rendezvous paths for the Apollo lunar module and command module flights to the moon. Her calculations were also essential to the beginning of the space shuttle program, and she worked on plans for a human mission to Mars. She was known as a human computer for her tremendous mathematical capability and ability to work with space trajectories with such little technology and recognition at the time. And finally, but certainly not least, this is Ms. Dorothy Jean Vaughan. She was born on September 20th, 1910. She too became a mathematician and was considered a human computer. You guessed it, she worked at Langley as well, and the organization that became known as NASA. Her work included supervising the other human computers in her department, the West Area Computing Division, which was made up of all black women. She became the first African American woman to receive a promotion and supervise a group of staff at the center. She later was promoted officially to position of supervisor. During her 28-year career, Vaughn prepared for the introduction of computers in the early 1960s by teaching herself the Fortran language. She also taught the staff the Fortran language and programming language. She later headed the programming section of the Analysis and Computation Division at Langley. Now, you know a little bit about these women. Do you recognize any of them? Maybe this will help. That is one of my favorite movies right now. How many of you are familiar with this movie? Good. I love this movie because it gives us a glimpse of what the women at Langley had to put up with. In particular, the women of color had to live through and endure in order to succeed in their lives, sometimes even to just survive the day. While the movie doesn't delve very deeply into their personal lives, it does touch on it enough to know that Dorothy had to overcome a manager who would not promote her because of the color of her skin. That is, until she taught herself something that she was not supposed to know or even learn about. It shows us how Mary had to overcome huge obstacles. One of merely being a woman in the 1960s who was thought of as not having enough intelligence to become an engineer, and then how she fought the legal battles to be able to attend school and get the education that she needed and wanted, to become the first female, and not only female, but black woman to attend an all-white college. And then there was Catherine, who was likely one of the brightest minds of the 20th century, and how she had to overcome her skin color, the fact that she was a woman, and likely smarter than any man in her department, because she single-handedly calculated the trajectories of the space capsule's re-entry to safely land Alan Shepard back on Earth. They're not powerful, right? They didn't have a lot of money. They had a lot of struggles that they had to face. They were not rich. In fact, in one scene in the movie, they're seen driving a 1957 Chevy that's broken down on the side of the road. Ms. Vaughn is the one who fixes the car on the side of the road. Beyond that, in my mind, they stand as examples of what it means to never give up in the face of any adversity, to persevere no matter what life throws at you. When you speak, and when I speak of these kind of modern day women, they help us to put into perspective what the writer of Hebrews was talking about this morning. They're not far away from the kinds of people that the writer of Hebrews brings up for us this morning. People from ancient history that we have no connection to, right? I mean, these women are at least someone that we had an idea about, yes? Did you connect better with them than you did with Barack? I mean, who is Barack? Not Obama. I was waiting for that. But seriously, I mean, they are women that we have at least some knowledge of. But the writer of the letter of Hebrews wants his readers to keep in mind that they face great opposition, just as those that he mentioned did. And we sitting here in the 21st century might not know exactly what that is or what he's trying to get across. And so I thought having women that we could connect with might help us. But we also need to consider the context. And when we consider this letter, we need to bear in mind that it was likely written sometime in the first century, sometime before 70 AD. And the reason I say that is because the letter of Hebrews, the writer of the letter of Hebrews, talks about the temple as if it still exists. And when you look at the history of the temple, it was destroyed by the Romans in 70 AD. I mean, completely obliterated. So in order for that to have been something that he mentions, it needed to happen before that. It was written by someone claiming to be Paul. And I say claiming to be Paul because we know from the writing and how it is written, the words that are used, that it is clearly not Paul's style. But the writer wanted to use his name so that people could connect to the writing. It was written to a group of people who at one time were Hebrew or Jewish. Hence the name Hebrews. Not a hard stretch, right? Did I lose you guys? Have I put you to sleep? Okay, good. Just making sure. The purpose of this particular portion of the letter was likely to convince these Jewish converts that they needed to persevere through whatever trial they might have been facing. And let's face it, the early Christians faced persecution, didn't they? Yes? No? Okay. I just want to make sure I'm checking myself on this one, okay? I mean, the early Christians faced huge trials and tribulations. The writer wants the Hebrews of this church to reflect on those from their past that stand as examples of how to persist in a world that stands against you. And so what we're presented with today is examples from the Hebrews' ancient past, and not so ancient past, to help them to understand how to also persist and persevere. Now let me ask you this question. Do we face persecution today? Okay, good. Whew. I am glad I have consensus on that. So what we're presented with are examples of the Israelites escaping from Egypt. Okay, that's huge persecution, right? Then we have the fall of the walls around Jericho, and how Rahab, a prostitute, helped the spies in Jericho prior to them, the walls falling down. By the way, if you did not know this is a bit of trivia that you may see in the future. Rahab is actually a part of the lineage of Jesus mentioned in the book of Matthew. A prostitute is an ancestor of Christ. Just throwing that out. The writer also briefly mentions other men in their faith history who stood in the face of great adversity. Now, here's what I'm hearing in these words. The writer wanted to encourage those around him, those who heard these words, to keep on keeping on. Because we know from written histories that those who converted from Judaism at the time of Christ and in that first century faced a lot of opposition. We know that at the beginning, Christianity was seen as a radical idea. Still a radical idea today, right? At least for a lot of folks in today's world, I think. I mean, how radical was it to say that you should love God and love your neighbor? But that was a radical idea at the time. Yet that's what people were crucified for believing that we should love one another. It is what Paul's former job was. He persecuted Christians. I mean, if you think about it, of the 12 disciples, 10 of them died from persecution. 10 of them died from persecution in ways that were cruel and heartless, all because they followed someone who taught us to love one another. And I can see how these people of this church might have needed some encouragement. During the first 40 years after Christ's death, Christians had to hide their faith. They had to hide in their homes. They could not worship freely. They could not actively express their faith for fear of retribution from the Pharisees and the Sadducees, not to mention how Rome looked upon them. Of course they needed encouragement. We need it today, right? And that is just what this writer wanted to remind them. He wanted them to look at those who stood up in the face of great tyranny and bad behavior in the past and think of them as a cloud of witnesses watching over them, standing there to cheer them on. Now, how many of us have ever seen a marathon race on TV? or actually physically been to one. Do you not see the most people crowded around the halfway point and at the end of the race? Do you know why that is? Because it's at the halfway point that most people need the most encouragement. They are the furthest away from the finish line as they will ever be. And the most people at the end of the line are there to continue to cheer them on to take those last 5, 10, 15, or 20 steps of the race. They're there to encourage them. Oftentimes you'll see them shouting and cheering and encouraging people on. The writer used examples like Moses and the judges who ruled over the Israelites and fought major battles to win the right to worship how they desired. He used examples of people, some of whom even today would not be considered to be an example to follow. Yet through their faith, they did some incredible things. Like the 3 women of the West Computing Group of Nassau in the 1960s, these were people who, despite all things standing against them, fought to be able to right wrongs, to escape slavery, provide sanctuary to those in need, and win the land promised to them for so many years. And so as we consider our great cloud of witnesses, what are they cheering us on toward today? What are the things that we face today that cause us to look up and say, I need strength and energy to endure? The women of the West Computing Group also remind me that there are those who do not have to be zealots. They don't have to be out there on the battle lines. They don't have to be out there forcing their thoughts and their beliefs on others. They don't have to be radicals to make a difference in this world. And I hope that as I've kind of talked through clouds of witnesses with you today, that you've thought of somebody that you can look to, aside from Christ, because that is the perfect example, but somebody that you can look to that provides you encouragement to keep on keeping on. Because the fact of the matter is, our cloud of witnesses are with us always, always around us. Maybe that's a person from your family, an ancestor, maybe it's a grandchild that gives you encouragement, that gives you someone to look to as an example in your life, someone that you can look to hope for a brighter future, shows you how to stand in the face of great adversity. We don't have to be radical in our thinking or our actions, but we do need to be always looking to make a difference in this world. And in this world, I think we need encouragement. I mean, I know I need somebody cheering me on from time to time. I'm short. I need a lot of encouragement. These legs were not made for running. I'm surprised I used that example. But seriously, I mean, who is it in our lives that helps us to see that things can be better? Who would you consider to be a part of your cloud of witnesses? Once you've named them for yourselves, I have to wonder how we take their life or their lives to help us to make a difference in this world. Because we can make a difference.